Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a story that really gripped everyone back in the summer of 2024. It started as, well, a search for a missing teenager on a Spanish island, but it became something much, much bigger.
Yeah, it really did. We're talking about Jay Slater, the 19-year-old British apprentice bricklayer who disappeared in Tenerife.
Exactly. And our sources today, they range from the official Spanish police reports, the forensic details from the inquest, all the way through to looking at this, well, frankly, unprecedented digital reaction that just exploded online.
And that's our focus, really. We want to try and cut through all that noise, move past the initial media frenzy, the emotion, and actually unpack the confirmed facts.
Right, what actually happened?
What do we know for sure? We need to look at the timeline, the investigation itself, which was incredibly difficult, the medical findings that eventually explained his death, and crucially, this massive role social media played, how it turned what seems to have been a tragic accident into this huge, global, and sometimes pretty malicious mystery.
And that core contradiction is just so stark, isn't it? You've got this young lad, just 19, trying to walk, what was it, 45 kilometers?
An estimated 10 or 11-hour walk,
Yeah.
back to his accommodation after a festival.
In this incredibly remote, dangerous mountain area. And his disappearance, it didn't just get attention. It instantly became this global talking point. It was everywhere.
That combination, youth, being vulnerable, this extreme environment, and then boom, instant global connectivity. That's why we need to really dive deep into this.
Okay, so before we get into the consequences in the online storm, we need to establish the basics.
Yeah.
Who is Jay Slater, and how did he actually end up in that specific dangerous spot? What are the confirmed facts?
Let's lay that groundwork. J. Dean Slater, born April 26, 2005, so just 19 when this happened, from Oswald-Swissel in Lancashire.
Okay.
He went to Ridings High School, then Accrington and Rossendale College studying bricklaying. Seems like he was into sports too, played football for Huncote United FC for years, like from age 6 right up to 17.
So a pretty typical young guy, fit, active.
Yeah, sounds like it. Physically, he was about 1.8 meters, so 5'11", weighed around 70 kilos or 150 pounds. But the trip itself, that's key context. He went to Tenerife for the Energy Music Festival.
Right. The 3-day event at Papagayo Beach Club, that's down in the south, Playa de las Americas area.
Exactly, the main tourist hub. The festival kicked off around June 16th, 2024.
So he's there with friends, presumably, in the busy part of the island. But then something changes. He doesn't stay south.
No, and this is the critical decision. Sometime after the festival, he travels way up north on the island. He actually separates from the friends he initially traveled with.
Okay.
And he ends up in Mosca, this tiny remote mountain village. And he's with two men he'd apparently just met at the festival.
Mosca. I mean, that's not somewhere you just stumble upon, is it? It's deep in the Tenno Mountains.
Absolutely not. It's known for its stunning views, but also sheer drops, winding roads, deep ravines. It's beautiful, but properly rugged, quite dangerous if you don't know it.
And those two men he was with, there was a lot of speculation about them early on.
There was. They drove him the 35 kilometers north to an Airbnb in Mosca. But the police, the Guardia Civil, they looked into them pretty quickly. They confirmed quite early on that these two men were, and this is the official term, not relevant to the disappearance. They found no reason to hold them or suspect them of anything. They basically just confirmed the timeline of events with them.
Right, so that simplifies things a bit. It wasn't some sinister plot, it sounds like. Maybe a party just carried on and ended up somewhere remote.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the morning of June 17th. This is where things really accelerate towards tragedy.
Okay, walk us through that morning.
Right, so around 8:00 a.m. local time, that's Western European summertime, the owner of the place they stayed, Casa Abuelatina, she spoke to Jay. She told him the bus back south wasn't due until 10 a.m.
2 hours, if he just waited.
Exactly. But he didn't. The owner actually drove past him a little later. And she noticed something really important.
What was that?
He was walking quickly, she said. But critically, he was going the wrong way. Not towards the bus stop, not even on the main road out of Moscow towards the south. He seemed to have just decided to walk the entire distance.
Walk 45 kilometers through the mountains? That sounds incredibly risky.
It does. And then we have the phone calls. These are really chilling. There were 3 main calls we know about, all pretty close together.
Okay.
First one at 8:21 a.m. He called a friend he'd traveled with. Just seems to have confirmed he was up in the mountains somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Then another call at 8:32 a.m. This one lasted a bit longer, about 2 minutes. And then the final, really haunting one at 8:50 a.m. That lasted just 22 seconds.
22 seconds. Wow. What did he finish to say in that last call? It must have been frantic.
It sounds like it was. The message was clear and devastating. He told his friend he was lost. His phone battery is dying. He said it was down to 1%. He desperately needed water.
Oh, no.
And crucially, he also mentioned he'd already hurt himself. He said he cut his leg on a cactus.
A cactus. So he was already off the path in the scrubland.
Seems very likely, yes. That detail suggests he wasn't sticking to any road or track. He was already in the rough terrain.
So injured, dehydrated, lost, phone dying. And he still thought he could walk 45 kilometers back to Los Cristianos.
That's what he told his friend he was attempting. That's 28 miles.
I mean, I have to jump in here. 45K on flat ground in good conditions is a marathon plus some. Doing that in the Tino Mountains, which is all steep ups and downs, rocky trails under the June sun in Tenerife, especially if he was, maybe hungover or impaired from the night before with no water. It sounds almost suicidal.
The authorities' immediate assessment was likely severe disorientation and panic. And tragically, that seems spot on. That landscape, it's defined by steep drops, loose scree. Any local would tell you that trek, even fully prepared, is an 11-hour ordeal.
For someone prepared.
Exactly. For someone lost, exhausted from a festival, already off path, it was just impossible. His last known location was pinged in the Teno Nature Reserve. And adding to this picture of him being unsteady, the friend he spoke to, she later reported that during an earlier video call that morning, she actually heard the sound of him slipping on gravel.
Wow. So the environment was already getting the better of him.
It seemed so. And then, at 9:04 a.m., less than 15 minutes after that final 22-second call, he was officially reported missing.
So that very narrow window of communication, those last known coordinates, that was basically all the investigators had to start with. The mountain itself was the main challenge from minute one.
Absolutely. The search kicked off almost immediately, but it was constrained entirely by those final phone signals in this vast, incredibly difficult terrain.
Okay, so he's reported missing. Given the location and the circumstances, the official response must have been pretty significant right away.
It was. The Guardia Civil launched a major search operation immediately. And the Missing Persons Organization, SOS Desaparecidos, they classified him correctly as highly vulnerable.
What kind of resources did they put into it?
It was extensive. They recognized the danger straight away. We're talking drones for aerial views, specialist sniffer dogs. They even had to bring in extra tracker dogs from Madrid, which tells you something.
Yeah, that shows the scale.
And helicopters, multiple helicopters, trying to cover this huge area. They were focused on searching caves, ravines, cliffs, anywhere someone could have fallen or sought shelter. There was one ravine mentioned specifically, 600 meters deep.
600 meters? That's enormous. Almost 2,000 feet.
Yeah, like stacking 2 Eiffel Towers. So this wasn't just a walk-in-the-park search. It was a full-on mountain rescue operation in extreme conditions.
And initially, they had to deal with those early potential leads, right? Like the 2 men he was with.
Exactly. That took up crucial early time. They were questioned, their stories checked, police confirmed they weren't relevant, and they were allowed to go back to the UK. That let investigators focus purely on the location and the phone data.
But there was also that brief moment where the search shifted south, wasn't there? Towards Los Cristianos?
There was, yeah, based on a potential sighting or lead down there. But it proved unreliable. The police pretty quickly disregarded it and came back to the Teno area, concluding that the phone ping data was the most solid piece of evidence they had.
Sticking to the tech footprint in that wild environment.
It seemed the most logical approach.
Yeah.
And you also had the family, obviously desperate, circulating things like that blurry CCTV image from Santiago del Teide. They thought it might be Jay, maybe 10 hours after he went missing.
Understandable they'd grasp at anything, but probably hard to verify.
Very. And it just shows the kind of chaos and confusion you get in these situations. Limited signal, vast geography, and this flood of information, some helpful, some not.
Despite all these resources, you mentioned 30 to 40 people involved some days. The active physical search was called off relatively quickly, wasn't it? That caused a lot of criticism.
It did, and that's a really key point here. The Guardia Civil officially discontinued the active ground search on June 30th. That's less than 2 weeks after he disappeared.
Less than 2 weeks for a highly vulnerable missing person in mountains. That sounds fast.
It drew immediate and pretty sharp criticism, especially internationally. Questions were raised about the Spanish police procedures.
Did they defend that decision?
Yes, the mayor of Santiago del Teide, Emilio Navarro, he spoke out. He basically said the physical search was suspended because they felt they'd thoroughly scoured the immediate area based on the phone data multiple times. He stressed the investigation itself, the analysis, intelligence work was absolutely continuing. They just weren't actively sending teams up the ravines every day at that point.
But stopping the physical search, that must have created a kind of vacuum, right? Especially with the growing online interest. It probably fueled suspicion that maybe they weren't doing enough.
I think it definitely contributed to that perception. And then came the news that the ongoing investigation was being carried out under secrecy.
Under secrecy? Why?
Officially, it was because of the intense public interest. They wanted to avoid, quote, curious onlookers, potentially interfering or getting hurt. While secrecy can be normal in complex cases, in this particular pressure cooker environment, it just looked opaque.
Yeah, it probably made things worse online, feeding the idea that something was being hidden.
Exactly. Just as the digital crowd was demanding total transparency, the official investigation clamped down. It really intensified the conspiracy theories.
And wasn't there also some friction between the UK and Spanish police about offers of help?
Yes, that became another major point of criticism. Lancashire Constabulary, Jay's home force, offered special support. Expertise in missing persons cases, potentially bridging communication gaps.
And the Guardia Civil?
They rejected the offer, flat out turned it down.
Why would they do that?
That's the question critics asked. People like Mark Williams-Thomas, a former UK detective, publicly criticized them for declining what he saw as valuable specialized help. Jay's mother also mentioned feeling there was a language barrier causing problems.
So it looked like maybe prioritizing operational control over potentially getting a faster result.
That was certainly the criticism leveled by some UK experts and the family. It became a real sore point.
But regardless of procedure or criticism, the sheer difficulty of that terrain remained the constant factor. And that brings us to that absolutely chilling detail from the search, the other person they found.
Yeah, the irony there is just staggering, isn't it? While searching desperately for Jay Slater in those ravines,
To find someone else.
they stumble upon and rescue a 51-year-old Scottish hiker. He was found near Jay's last known location. And this hiker had been missing since June 21st. He'd been out there, lost for nearly a week.
Oh my God, so the search for Jay literally saved this other man's life.
It seems very likely. The report said the hiker was trapped in a ravine, couldn't get out on his own because of the difficulty of the spot and lack of communication.
Wow.
Now, the hiker himself later apparently downplayed it, saying he was experienced and didn't need rescuing. But the fact remains, the Guardia Civil found him because they were looking for Jay.
It's just a terrifying illustration of how dangerous that place is. People can just vanish there.
Absolutely. It powerfully underscores the lethal nature of the Tano Nature Reserve.
Yes.
Get off the path, get disoriented, get unlucky, and the consequences can be fatal. It shows why the initial focus on that area, despite the lack of finding Jay quickly, was the right call. The danger was very, very real.
So after weeks of this with speculation running rampant online, the breakthrough finally came. But it was the news everyone feared.
Yes, on July 15th, nearly a month after he disappeared, Spanish police confirmed they had found human remains. And crucially, they were discovered in the vicinity of Jay's last mobile phone location.
Back in that Tano area.
Exactly. Specifically in the Juan Lopez Ravine, which is about 10 kilometers inland from the coast. The location aligned perfectly with those final phone pings, essentially vindicating the Guardia Civil's focus on that specific zone.
And recovering the body, given the terrain.
It was incredibly difficult. The remains were found with Jay's possessions, his clothes. But the ravine was so inaccessible they needed a helicopter from the Regional Emergency Rescue Service just to retrieve the body.
A really challenging operation right to the end. And then came the formal identification.
The next day, July 16th, DNA fingerprinting confirmed the remains were indeed Jay Slater's. The initial autopsy was carried out straight away in Spain.
What did that first examination suggest?
Even though the body showed advanced decomposition due to the time and the heat, the initial findings pointed towards injuries consistent with an accidental fall. A plunge from height was the term used, noting broken bones. That set the direction for the official conclusion.
But for absolute certainty, a more detailed post-mortem was done back in the UK, right?
Correct. After his body was repatriated. And that UK post-mortem confirmed the precise cause of death, traumatic head injuries, consistent with a fall from a significant height.
A fall from height. And did it say anything about when death occurred?
Yes, and this is important. The report stated that death would have been instantaneous.
Instantaneous. So it wasn't a case of him suffering from exposure or dehydration for days after a fall?
No, the forensic conclusion was that the fall itself was immediately fatal due to the head injuries.
Okay. That's grimly clarifying, I suppose. But the how was the fall. The why he fell, that came later, didn't it, at the
Yes.
inquest?
Exactly. The full picture really emerged almost a year later in May 2025 at the inquest held at Preston Coroner's Court. This is where the toxicology results became public.
Ah, the toxicology. What did that show?
It confirmed the presence of a mix of substances in Jay's system. Traces of alcohol, MDMA, cocaine, and ketamine.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a combination. Alcohol, MDMA, cocaine, and ketamine.
Yes, a significant cocktail.
Now, we need to be careful here, but connecting that toxicology result to the environment he was in, that combination must have had a profound impact on his ability to navigate, right? Can you break down why that mix would be so dangerous in that specific situation, attempting that huge walk in the mountains?
Absolutely. It's crucial not just to list the drugs, but to understand their effects in that context. You've got alcohol, which impairs judgment and coordination. Then MDMA and cocaine, they're stimulants.
Right.
So they might mask fatigue, maybe give a false sense of confidence or energy, making him think he could do that 45-kilometer walk. But they also severely increase dehydration risk and raise body temperature, which is incredibly dangerous in the heat.
Okay. And the ketamine.
Ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic. It fundamentally alters perception of reality, depth perception, and severely impairs motor control and coordination. It can make you feel detached from your body and your surroundings.
So putting it all together, he wasn't just tired or a bit drunk. He was likely dealing with potential dehydration from the stimulants, plus profound disorientation, poor coordination, altered reality perception from the ketamine and alcohol, all while trying to walk on loose rocks near sheer drops.
Precisely. That combination creates a perfect storm for a catastrophic accident in that terrain. The poor decision to walk in the first place, the likely overconfidence masking his actual state, the inability to judge distances or the stability of the ground beneath him, it makes an accidental fall not just possible, but tragically very probable from a scientific standpoint.
It explains the sequence: the bad decision, getting lost, leaving the path, the slip heard on the phone, and then the fatal fall.
Yes, it provides a logical, albeit devastating, explanation for the chain of events.
Did the inquest address all the online theories about foul play? Kidnapping, being chased, all that stuff?
It did address it, primarily through the medical evidence. The coroner noted there were absolutely no signs of assault on the body, no signs of restraint, nothing to suggest he was under threat from anyone else. The conclusion was based purely on the fall and the toxicology.
So ruling out third-party involvement.
Explicitly, yes.
Yeah.
The coroner was clear on that.
There was one other issue mentioned around the inquest, wasn't there? About witnesses.
Yeah, a slightly unfortunate point. Several of Jay's friends who were on holiday with him didn't actually attend the inquest to give evidence, despite requests.
Why not? Do we know?
The reasons weren't fully detailed publicly, but their absence was noted. It maybe made it slightly harder to piece together the absolute final hours before he left Masca, but ultimately it didn't change the core forensic findings about how he died.
The facts were clear from the body and the location.
Correct. So the final ruling from the inquest pulled it all together. It confirmed he fell an estimated 20 to 25 meters.
Which is like, what, 6 or 7 stories high?
Roughly, yeah. A significant drop. This caused catastrophic fractures to his skull and pelvis, leading to the instantaneous death we mentioned. And the official coroner's ruling was accidental death.
Accidental death. So after a month of this global whirlwind of speculation, crime, theft, abduction, the final official answer was a tragic accident, fueled by impairment, ending in a fatal fall in a dangerous place.
That's the conclusion the evidence overwhelmingly supported. A heartbreaking accident.
And that official conclusion, accidental death, it stands in such stark contrast to the narrative that dominated for weeks, doesn't it? The sheer scale of the media attention was immense.
Oh, absolutely massive. It wasn't just UK news, it was global. For weeks, it felt like the main story everywhere. People were comparing it to the Madeleine McCann case in terms of the intensity of public interest.
That level of focus.
But it's important to have context, like we discussed. Local reports pointed out, Jay was tragically one case among many. There were apparently 82 unresolved missing persons cases in the Canary Islands since the 80s, with 50 on Tenerife alone.
50 on Tenerife, wow.
So why did this case explode? Well, the elements were there, weren't they? Young British tourist, music festival, mysterious disappearance in a remote, dramatic location. It just hit all the buttons for a media storm, a kind of perfect storm of factors leading to intense selection bias.
And while the world was watching this unfold like some kind of drama series, his family, particularly his mom, Debbie Duncan, were living through this absolute nightmare amplified by the internet.
It's hard to even imagine. She initially voiced fears he might have been abducted.
Yeah.
And that vulnerability was just seized upon by trolls.
What kind of abuse did she face?
It was horrendous. Constant vile messages on social media, but also sickening prank calls. People claiming they had Jay, demanding ransom money. Just cruel, unimaginable stuff.
Prank ransom calls? That's just
Yeah.
beyond words.
She described being terrorized by these online trolls. And disgustingly, it didn't even stop when his body was found. The abuse continued even after the funeral.
Unbelievable. And she even had to publicly deny specific online rumors, didn't she, about him stealing something?
Yeah, this bizarre rumor took hold that he'd stolen a 12,000-pound Rolex watch before he disappeared. And she, a grieving mother, had to actually issue statements denying this complete fantasy cooked up by anonymous people online. It shows how quickly fiction became treated as fact.
And his past history was dragged into it too, wasn't it? That incident back in the UK.
Yes. Details emerged about a serious assault in 2021 involving Jay and others, where someone was badly injured. Jay had received a community sentence for it in 2023.
Oh, okay.
Once that became public knowledge, it was like pouring gasoline on the fire for the online speculation. It instantly fed into the darker theories.
How so?
Well, for the conspiracy-minded, it created a narrative. See, he has a history of trouble. It made theories about him being in debt or fleeing someone or the disappearance being linked to gang scores seem more plausible in their eyes. It overshadowed the simple facts of him being on holiday.
So his past was weaponized to fit the mystery narrative.
Completely.
Yeah.
Which brings us squarely to this phenomenon of the digital sleuths and the sheer volume of online speculation. It was like the Nicola Bully case, but maybe even more intense globally.
Right. And these theories weren't based on much, were they?
Often based on absolutely nothing concrete. Unconfirmed rumors, whispers, even doctored or fake screenshots being passed around just to stir things up or get clicks. The scale was mind-boggling. You mentioned TikTok earlier.
Yeah, over 30 million videos using the phrase Jay Slater opinions. 30 million.
It's staggering. It wasn't just news coverage. It was participatory entertainment for millions. And a lot of those videos weren't just speculating. They were pushing truly outlandish ideas, like he'd fake the whole thing for money or attention.
And it wasn't just online, right? Some people actually went to Tenerife.
Yes, people flew out there, apparently inspired by social media discussions, thinking they could help the official search. Individuals with no training, no local knowledge, trying to insert themselves into a dangerous, professional mountain rescue operation.
That sounds incredibly counterproductive and potentially dangerous for them, too. What did the professionals think of that?
They were not impressed. Matt Searle, the CEO of the charity LBT Global, which helps families of missing people abroad, he strongly criticized them, called them armchair detectives and so-called experts. He urged them to stop speculating because it was hindering the real work and causing distress.
It really became a case study in online behavior, didn't it? There was analysis of the trolling aspect.
Yeah, Ginger Gorman, who wrote a book on trolls, made the point that targeting the family, the most vulnerable people in the story, gives trolls that sick feeling of power. It generates the biggest reaction, which is what they crave.
And beyond the malicious trolling, there was that cognitive aspect, too. Why people believe the conspiracies. You mentioned apophenia.
Yes. Sarah Polak, a social media expert, talked about apophenia. That's our tendency to see patterns and connections where none actually exist. People take tiny, unrelated scraps of information, the cactus cut, the previous legal trouble, the remote location, and weave them into this complex narrative of crime or conspiracy.
Because the simple truth is too simple.
Often, yeah. An accidental fall due to impairment isn't a very satisfying story. Apophenia fills the void with drama, like you said before, with the cactus cut.
Right. Instead of he stumbled off the path, it becomes proof he was running from someone.
Exactly. It gets twisted. Maybe it wasn't a cactus. Maybe it was a knife wound. Or he cut himself because he was fleeing a debt collector. It connects dots that aren't actually connected, rejecting the mundane reality, a disoriented kid making a fatal mistake for something more elaborate.
And this whole frenzy wasn't just emotional or psychological. It quickly became commercial.
Almost immediately. That GoFundMe page, Get Jay Slater Home, faced intense online scrutiny about where the money was really going. GoFundMe had to step in and reassure people funds would be verified.
And the fake pages.
At least 7 fake GoFundMe pages were set up trying to cash in on his name. They had to be found and deleted. It shows the instant financial exploitation angle.
And it went beyond fundraising. Books started appearing.
Yes, Amazon came under fire for allowing multiple conspiracy theory books about Jay Slater's disappearance to be sold on its platform, even on Kindle. People were literally writing and selling instant books based on pure speculation while the search was still ongoing.
Monetizing a tragedy in real time, That feels like a new low.
It raises serious ethical questions about platform responsibility for sure.
The case had such reach, it even prompted political calls for action back in the UK.
It did. A couple of Labour MPs, Sarah Smith and Chris Webb, called on the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer at the time, to bring in tougher sanctions against online trolls. They argued the existing laws just weren't equipped to handle this scale and speed of online abuse.
So it highlighted a gap in regulation.
A huge gap. And then publications like The New Statesman used the case to make a broader cultural critique.
What was their take?
They argued it was a prime example of how our true crime culture can actually desensitize us. That for many online participants, the goal wasn't finding Jay, it was solving the mystery they'd created. The tragedy became a puzzle, a game, leading to mockery and wild accusations instead of empathy for the family. The human cost just gets lost in the noise.
So as we move towards wrapping up, we should definitely acknowledge the response back in Jay's hometown, Oswald Twistle, once the tragic outcome was confirmed.
Yeah, there was a real outpouring of community grief and support. They lined the streets with hundreds of blue ribbons. Blue seemed to be a color associated with him.
Right.
There was an emotional vigil soon after his body was found. About 100 people gathered, releasing dozens of blue balloons with messages. A very public display of mourning.
And his college paid tribute, too.
Accrington and Rossendale College, yeah. They described him as a hardworking apprentice with a very bright future ahead of him, just highlighting the personal loss.
And the funeral itself sounded like a very large emotional event.
It was. Held in August, apparently up to 500 people attended. The family specifically asked for it to be a celebration of his life, asking people to wear blue.
A celebration amid the grief.
Yeah, he was remembered in tributes as a loving son, cherished brother, a loyal friend. Lots of memories shared about his football playing days, being a natural footballer. A very personal farewell after such a horribly public ordeal.
So we're left with this absolutely stark contrast, aren't we? On the one hand, you have the cold, hard, official facts.
Immutable facts, accidental death, a fall from 25 meters, catastrophic instantaneous head injuries.
Yeah.
Fueled by a cocktail of alcohol and drugs, MDMA, cocaine, ketamine, leading to disorientation and impaired judgment in a lethal environment. A tragic mistake.
And on the other hand?
You have the month-long global narrative, this huge, swirling digital event built almost entirely on speculation, rumor, suspicion, crime, kidnapping, theft, conspiracy theories, all commercially exploited, amplified by millions online. For so many people watching, that digital fantasy seemed more real, more compelling than the simple tragic truth.
And the relevance for you listening to this really lies in grappling with that disconnect. The Jay Slater case is maybe one of the clearest examples we've seen of how tragedy plays out now. There's the physical event, the awful thing that happened in that ravine. And then there's the simultaneous digital event, this vast, often toxic echo chamber created by instant global communication and speculation. And arguably, the digital fallout was in many ways more complex and maybe even more damaging in the long run than the physical investigation itself.
And we know now the inquest confirmed it beyond doubt. No third-party involvement. It was an accident. Which leads us, I think, to our final thought, something to really mull over.
Okay.
Given that the truth was ultimately mundane and its tragedy and accident, misjudgment, environment, impairment, what responsibility does that global digital audience bear? When millions willingly participate in transforming a family's desperate search for a vulnerable young man into a public spectacle, a commercially exploited mystery filled with baseless accusations, wild fantasies, and horrific abuse aimed at the grieving.
What's the real human cost when the simple, awful truth gets completely drowned out by literally millions of videos dedicated not to facts, but to opinions and speculation?
That's the question, isn't it? What's the cost of instant, unsupervised global crowd sleuthing when it collides with real human tragedy? That's something we all probably need to think about more carefully.